So I was telling the crowd we got people from 40 states here, so 39 not from Georgia. If you want to give them a sales pitch on why they should move here.
Well, I actually talked to a couple people. I won't say where they're from, but they actually just moved here, and they're glad to have a good conservative Republican governor. So, and I know we have people from Louisiana. I don't think you mentioned Louisiana. Big governor's race there, and then Kentucky this year as well, and Mississippi.
In fact, my parents sitting over there from Louisiana. So now I want to ask you about Georgia. One of the questions we got actually, let me find her name real quick. I know she's from Waycross, and her name is Jill. She submitted a question, and she wanted to know, she hears a lot in the media about the economy in Georgia, and so much of it is focused on what's happening in Atlanta, and wanted to know if you could talk about the economy for the rest of the state.
Oh, great question. And there's no doubt, especially for people that are outside of Georgia, our economy, I'm really excited about everything that's going on in Georgia. We've had two great Republican governors that have been, really good on the economy in very different times. Governor Perdue, some really tough times that we had to go through, handed it off to Governor Deal when we were coming out of the Great Recession, and he really drove the ship in Georgia, did a lot of great things economic development-wise, and just had a great run. I'm just praying that it continues for 8 years, but I don't think it's going to. I mean, we're just in a part of a cycle where we're facing some really interesting, climates around the world, not just with China, but you look at South Korea and Japan and other things that are going on in Europe. There's just there's a lot that we can't control here in the state. So we've got to keep our environment good. We've got to keep working very hard on jobs and growth, which in Atlanta, it's been fantastic because of the assets that we have with the airport. But it is going to challenge our budgets in the future. I ran on a spending cap and really making government more efficient, reeling in spending, and that's something that we're going to be talking about in the days and weeks to come. To start reeling things back and really pushing our folks to make government more efficient and smaller and really have a better return on investment for the taxpayers. But around the rest of the state, I campaigned on that. I focused on it because I've lived it in the private sector for 30 years, and I've seen it as somebody that's traveled to all 159 counties in our state, visiting with chamber people, economic development folks, hardworking Georgians that just do not have the opportunity in rural Georgia and other parts of our state that they once had. And we're refocusing our effort on that. We're working really hard with the Department of Economic Development to implement one thing I campaigned on, a strike team to focus on those parts of the state to see how we can partner with the local economic developers to bring more jobs and investment. And we've had some great announcements on different things, that aren't in places that you typically hear about, but we're going to be really focusing more on that. And I'm, as tough as the issues are out there, I'm also very optimistic because we have hardworking people, which businesses that are looking to relocate or grow in a state, they got to have a workforce. And we've got that. We've got hardworking people. We just don't have a lot of the assets in some places like you need, whether it's high-speed internet, quality health care, or, the kind of sites that are site-ready, build-ready, shovel-ready, if you will. And that's a few of the things that we're going to focus on, as well as the last point is the Georgians First Commission that I created. Great group of folks that are all small business related, either helping small business people or small business owners themselves. They're looking at government regulations, red tape, bureaucracy, our tax structure. What is hindering small business in Georgia? How do we become the best state in the country for small business? And we'll be working on that in the legislative session when they have their report back.
You mentioned the saving up and preparing for economic change. It was one of the things I wanted to ask you about is as governor, you've signed legislation now to increase pay for teachers around the state, which is great. And at the same time, we also know with the Fed cutting interest rates, there's a suggestion the economy may be slowing down. But what goes into your office planning for the future and whether or not there may be an economic slowdown?
Well, that's what's so hard is trying to fund. I think for me, we've got to really refocus government on funding the things that we, are our priorities and what is our vision. What do we believe in today, but like, where do we want to go 5 years, 10 years from now? And we cannot keep losing 44% of our teachers in the first 5 years that they get into the profession. I mean, that is unsustainable. It's happening in rural, urban, and suburban districts. And that's why, I feel like we've got to do the pay raise and we've got to fulfill the commitment. We got 3,000 of the 5,000 that I had committed last year, but we got to keep working on that. But to pay for that, when you have an economy that is not as expanding as it was, we're not going to have the discretionary income that, say Governor Deal had when he did law enforcement pay raises and funded a lot of other initiatives that he was working on. So how do you pay for that when the economy's either flat or if it dips a little bit? And that's where we got to really get ahead of the curve. Don't wait for tough economic times to make budget cuts or to figure out how government can save money and streamline. And, that's some of the direction that we're going to be given is how do we use technology that as our state grows, we don't have to grow every single government agency with it. We use technology to do more work, not necessarily hiring more people. There's some agencies, having run an executive branch, I know that some agencies like our call center, we have to have people to answer the phone. It's hard to get machines to do that and get people where they need to go. And the technology can make you more efficient. And we have our person who's been doing that for me for a long time, working in all of state government right now. But there's other agencies where systems can, meet the need of a growing agency or maybe even shrink that agency. So those are the things that we're going to be working. We've actually already been working on those and we're going to be doing more of it.
So unlike every bank in America that uses those awful voice assistants, you're telling me you want real people answering phones to get people real answers?
Well,
Siri?
I called somebody the other day and they had one of those automated voicemail systems and I never could get through to anybody. And, automation's great if it will take you to somebody that can answer your question, but when you can't, it leaves the customer very frustrated. And we went from, at times in the Secretary of State's office, when we had peak seasons, either during elections or corporate filing renewal the first quarter of the year, where we had 30-40% abandonment rate, 3 or 4 out of every 10 people that called the office hung up before they ever talked to anybody because they got so frustrated. Well, on normal days when I left, we would be in the 1 to probably 3 or 5% ratio. And that's something that just through technology, the new call center manager, controlling our own destiny, getting off the state's network, privatizing that in our office, we just did a lot better job with customer service. And as a statewide elected official, I knew it. Because when I first got in office, I used to just get hammered by people. They're like, we can't get through on the phone. This is ridiculous. And by the time I left, I hardly ever got any complaints on our call center. So we actually have that person that's now working with every state agency. So I think you'll start to see some change over the next 6 months there.
Well, you speak of 6 months. You've now been about 8 months on the job. What's the most interesting thing you've learned about being governor?
Well, that is a really good question. People ask me that question, what surprised you the most or what's the most difficult thing you've had to deal with? In the first 3 or 4 months in office, there wasn't really anything that was as difficult as the campaign was. But now that we've settled in, it's really, you just can never know when an issue's going to come up that hasn't even been on your radar that you're going to have to deal with. Thankfully, we have a great team that really focuses hard and quickly on those issues. And I think we've handled most of those very well. We did learn several things during the legislative session, which I think probably any governor does. I know there's several of our legislators here today and former legislators. I appreciate their service and the great success we had this session. So I think we'll only get better at that. But some of the appointments that I've had to make has been brutally hard because really good people, and we're trying to put people in places, whether it's judicial picks, running agencies, putting them on boards that are conservatives like myself, but they're not angry at anybody. You know, they're just looking for good solutions to government, good ideas. You know, how do we keep pushing that message of making government smaller and more efficient and do more with less and kind of being happy warriors, if you will. But man, I've had to make some really tough choices because I've had some good people to have to pick from.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that. I know some of them, and
I mean, it's just
really solid
grueling.
picks.
Yeah, it's
Well, and one of the picks you've made recently is John King to be the insurance commissioner, bringing Georgia its first statewide Hispanic public servant.
Well, look, John, you know, in addition to being, you know, I think the first Hispanic, Latino constitutional officer in Georgia, which is historic by nature. But, you know, my thing with John is I interviewed him during the transition to be the adjunct general for the National Guard and went a different direction. That was probably the toughest pick I had to make during the transition. But I was really impressed with John. His military background, he's been on the beat as a police officer in the metro area. He's been the Doraville police chief. He served, you know, on the border, literally building the wall down there, commanding that force that was doing that. He served overseas in combat. Just a solid guy. He has a reputation and the experience of bringing change to an agency and cleaning things up. And I felt like the biggest thing I needed to do was pick somebody that would restore trust to that agency. Despite whatever the legal issues that are, I believe in the judicial system playing that out, you know, innocent until proven guilty. But for me, I felt like people either had lost or were losing confidence in the insurance department. And we need somebody that can instill confidence from day one, that, you know, weren't going to owe anybody politically. They could get over there and make sure and put people in there that would restore trust. And John has experience doing that. And a lot of people don't realize the insurance agency commissioner's office, half of what they do over there is investigations, and that's what John has done most of his career, especially in law enforcement. And he has the experience of running, you know, organizations that have large groups of people, and he's got a great chief of staff over there that has good experience, and he's really moving the needle. So I'm excited. You know, politically, I'll let John speak for himself. I think he's going to be a pretty tough campaigner out there.
Good. I know one of the most difficult things you have to deal with as governor, and something we've unfortunately seen too many of in the last year, are deaths of police officers around the state. What are you thinking as far as, I mean, is there anything the state can do to help local law enforcement? We've had several of these police shootings in the last year now.
Well, I haven't really looked at our statutes for protecting our police officers, but I can tell you this, they know I have their back. I have shown that by my actions probably more than my words. It's sad to say I can't remember how many funerals I've been to now during the transition and as governor. I make very low-key entrance and exits at those services because I'm not there to do anything other than to let people know that I know what that community is going through. I know what that family is going through. And we just have to have those men and women, we have to have their back that are out there fighting for us. And look, not, you know, like politicians, not every police officer or law enforcement officer is a good person. You know, there's people that make mistakes and go too far, but, you know, our folks are out there literally every day putting their lives on the line, every day in, day out, very unappreciated in certain communities. And we're a state that appreciates our veterans, our active duty military, our National Guard, and our first responders, police, fire, EMS. And I heard stories the other day about people pouring buckets of water on police officers up in New York. That is outrageous. There are other ways to handle a political situation or something that may be going on, and I'm just proud that we're not going to do that in Georgia.
Amen. Governor, I know that has to be one of the hardest parts of being governor is comforting those families and those communities. But you've also having to deal with still the situation down in South Georgia where they had a natural disaster come through in the form of a hurricane. A lot of farmers have lost crops. Bankruptcies have gone up in that area. What do you as governor do when you assess the situation, particularly because the hurricane came through in someone else's administration, and yet there's still ongoing problems down there?
Yeah, that was a very frustrating situation. I know Senator Perdue's going to be here a little later in the day, I believe.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. And I will tell you, him and Senator Isaacson both were fighting very hard, I think, in a very tough political environment. It's sick to say in our country right now that disaster relief would get political, but it did, and it was very frustrating for me. I vented that frustration many times to the media and to others in Washington, and I spoke many times with the Vice President and the President. They were fully supportive of what we were trying to do in Georgia and certainly Florida, and really disaster relief in other parts of the country. But it was a frustrating position for me because literally our state had done just about everything we could, funding state dollars first to help in a small way. And I think the best thing was just, the people down there knew we were fighting for them. I think that held their morale together. Once the bill got passed, they know, there's going to be funds flowing. It's just a matter of when. And they're resilient people down there. But literally I was down there recently. I just drove through there the last couple of days, and there's generational losses down there when you think about pecan farmers that their whole orchard was wiped out, or 60% of it, or 70 or 80%. Devastating crop losses last year when yields were going to be as good as we've ever seen them in Georgia. So it was a really tough issue. We got to keep fighting for them. I think that makes, what we're doing with our focus on the strike team and the Department of Economic Development to let people know. And this is not something you're going to fix in a year or two. We're going to have to work on this every year, the whole time I'm in office, and I'm committed to doing that. And I'll actually be back down there again next week. So showing up matters. Showing up matters to keep learning, to keep figuring out what can we do. How do we value add an agricultural product and figure out how we can talk, some manufacturing business that they're about to run out of California or somewhere else to come into Georgia, or growing jobs in our state, and really trying to figure that out. But I will say this: you got to have local communities that want to be involved in that effort. It never works when the state's trying to go push something to the local community. We got to have that local partnership where they believe in it. They'll get their workforce ready. They'll rally their community around and put some of their money where their mouth is as well, even if they don't have a lot, just something that shows that everybody is committed. Because we're dealing with a deal right now that would be a great deal in rural Georgia, but there's not buy-in from the locals, and it's probably not going to work. And that's frustrating for me, but that's just the way of the world.
I have to say, when you said it, I had to look around and make sure my wife is in the room, that you and she agree on the pronunciation of pecan.
Well, it's very, very simple. It's pecan or pecan.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to get high prices, it's pecan.
Well,
if you're in South Georgia, it's this pecan tree, right?
It's
all about marketing.
I always say that's what you flush. That's fine. She's not here to hear that. Now, I want to turn a little bit to the future. It's very interesting to note, after the tough campaign you fought, your polling and job approval numbers among independents, moderates, Republicans, even Democrats has gone up now significantly, well above 50% now, in the top quartile of governors nationwide. And you've only really been in the office for 8 months, so you've still got 3.5 years to push your agenda. What comes next for the governor's office?
It'd be nice if we were like some of these other countries, just call the election right now. Well, I think, people that know me, know this. Others that are here from out of state, maybe not. I've been a small business person for over 30 years, my wife and I both. have had to fight through some really hard times. We've seen her ups and downs. We have, you say 3 teenage daughters. Jarrett just turned 20, so we got 2 teenage daughters and 1 20-year-old. And last night at 9 o'clock, I was at my daughter's apartment taking some piece of furniture out of a box that had 10,000 screws. So that kind of stuff keeps me humble. But just the life experiences that I've been through, I know there's other Georgians that have gone through that. I really felt like the last campaign, it was a fight for the soul of our state and where we're going to go. We're either going to go in this direction or we're going to go in this direction. I think you're seeing the same thing in the presidential race right now. We're either going to continue to be a capitalist country, economic prosperity where anybody, literally anybody, can do anything they want, or whether you're going to have the government running everything in your life. And that's what I'm fighting so hard for every day. And I'll promise you, nobody's going to outwork us. So I would just say I don't really care what any polls are saying. I think most people have figured out by now the things that I campaigned on, I aim on doing those. And that's what we're doing every day. We're focusing on that teacher pay raise. We're focusing on the strike team to help with economic development in other parts of the state. Focusing on getting high-speed internet to areas that don't have it, good jobs and opportunity. We didn't even talk about public safety, but going after these street gangs and drug cartels. When the campaign started, you couldn't even get the press or the media to write about that. Now it's almost daily that you're seeing these things. And, we've got to stay focused on that. I assure you that Vic Reynolds, our new director of GBI, Marty and I visited with them on Friday at a sting operation they were doing going after sexual predators. They arrested 9 people. One person that just got out of prison who had a murder charge, I believe, got out of prison and was trying to hook up with a 14-year-old girl. Now imagine what would have happened to that child had he gotten to her. But thankfully, those men and women in law enforcement were staying up till 2 and 3, 4 o'clock in the morning going after these people. And we got a bunch of them last weekend. Those are the kind of things that we're just going to stay after it every day and do what we said we're going to do. And I've always been a firm believer that, if you run on something and you actually do it, then people will reward you with that. And if they don't, then I can go home knowing that I did what I said I was going to do.
Let me ask you lastly, before we run out of time. So I know it wasn't supposed to happen, but I was shocked last week down in Macon. We went out to dinner and streets were closed down because they were filming movies down there. And up at my office just the other day, they had one of the roads blocked off at Ansley Park because they were filming a movie up there. I thought Hollywood was going to run away from Georgia and business was going to flee, and yet I can't get around the city because all these movies are being filmed.
Well, I think, Eric, I've been pretty clear about my positions on the heartbeat bill and supporting the film industry in Georgia. As a conservative Republican, I believe that we can do both of those things. A lot of the people that, pushed and voted for the film tax credit that has really gotten us here where we are also supported the heartbeat bill. Those are Georgia values. We can't run from those. We shouldn't. That's what makes our state great. But I'm also not an angry person, and I support the film industry, the people that are making business decisions. They know the environment's good here. We have the infrastructure. We have the workforce. We've been on the cutting edge of that. I'm going to continue to spread that message, and they know that. There's other people politically that are pushing a different narrative that's actually, I think, hurting the industry more than any piece of legislation that was passed, but that's politics. They don't care about the industry. They care about their own personal politics, and it's more than one person that's doing that. But I think people that look at Georgia, they know what we have to offer, and the folks that we've been meeting with quietly and talking to, which is numerous, still are big believers in Georgia, and I'm going to continue to support them, and that's just what we're going to do. And I think that some may not want to work here, but I believe there's a lot that will.
There are. Governor Brian Kemp, thank you for stopping by this morning.